Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, season's greetings from myself, Dave D.
And me, Dave B.
Bringing all the Christmas cheer, aren't you, Dave?
Yeah, somewhat.
I think this is technically our Christmas episode, isn't it? But our listeners will be hearing from us again before the festive season really kicks in. We'll explain more about that in a little while. But this is episode 67. Lots of goodies for you, including an interview with a really interesting brewery who we found out makes some wonderful beers, Dave.
Not that it is a sort of gold standard that to be held up or anything, but long-time listeners will know I'm pretty finicky with my Untapped ratings, and obviously Untapped is about as subjective as it comes. But I don't give out fives very often, but I did give out a 5 after finishing this interview.
And the brewery is B-Man Brewery from Oxford. Well, you'll find out all about them, the sort of beers they brew, when Alex joins us a bit later for a chat. Got a bit of connective tissue as well with Oxford, which we'll come to in a minute. But before we get there, we've also got Hype or Tripe, which features not one but two big hitting beers from Manchester from Track. Now, looking forward to these because we haven't actually had much Track on the podcast in the 4 years we've been going.
No, and these beers are celebrating Track being around for 10 years, if you can believe it.
I remember when I first went to see Track, when they were in their very first location, which is now home to Sure Shots. So so it's really interesting. I've been following them for quite a number of years now. It'd be really interesting to see how those beers taste. We've also got Tried and Tested, our favourite beer since the last episode. But we're going to kick off, as we always do, with Brew to Me, where we have a beer from a brewery we haven't had before. And where is that brewery, Dave?
In one of those reality is stranger than friction moments, it is from Oxfordshire. And also, to be a bit different, we're both having the same beer. We are having a beer called Ground Stump, and it is from Twisted Tree, who are in Bicester. Now, Mark, who you will hear from in due course, was very happy to send out the beer. They've not been going long, started this year. The beer in question, it's an interesting sort of start, as we'll find out, but it's a stout. It's a stout in a 500ml bottle, but it is weighing in a rather mighty 6.9, which you don't see very often.
No, it's quite a brave thing to do because this is from their very first batch of beers, because they've only been going for a few months. So this is one of their very, very first beers. So straight in at nearly 7%. You've just had your first sip. I'm going to pour it out.
I think it pours really nicely.
Oh, it does.
Pours very oily.
It does.
Really malty brown head. You can have the glass a good 10 inches away from you. You can really smell the coffee in it.
Oh, yes, please. That is excellent. Wow.
It's a big, rich coffee stout, isn't it? It makes no bones about it.
Goodness me. That is really good. That is not that bitter coffee. It's not sweet or anything, but it hasn't got that bitterness to it. It's quite well balanced and smooth.
So the description on the back says it's our debut coffee stout featuring roasted flavours of dark malts. Yep. Invigorating essence of freshly brewed coffee. Yeah, brewed would be a good shout. It's not ground, is it? When you get that real coffee note which just hangs around.
You know, when you go into a coffee shop and you pay a little bit more and you have a really nice coffee. That's like this.
And you can sort of smell the machine in the background. That kind of thing, isn't it?
This isn't your instant coffee from the cafe on the corner. This is your quality artisanal coffee.
Which it should be if you're having an artisanal beer, as we are.
Yeah, so it all fits together.
And just wrapping up the description, this deep black stout offers an enticing aroma of espresso, dark chocolate, and hints of caramel.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. You can't really fault anything that's on the.
Well, we've got you giving 5s for one of the beers you had with our interviewee, and this is going to rate very highly from me. I don't know about you.
I'm really impressed. It's one of those, without being too, I don't want to be unkind to Twisted Tree, obviously, so it is in a 500ml bottle, which I don't think is unfair to say. If you see a 500ml bottle, though, if you think trad, don't you?
Yeah.
By and large, there is always the exceptions to the rule. Colonel do their bottles and big bottles and things like that. So it's not hard and fast, but generally, if you saw a bottle 500ml stout, you'd think, it's probably going to be trad. I like the Twisted Tree logo. The artwork for me is quite trad as well. Yeah, the taste is anything but.
100%. 100%. If you told me this came from who makes big, really full stouts, just trying to think.
It's a job, actually, because of the ABV, because you're not in your big dessert stouts, but equally a lot of other brewers, when they do their stouts, they don't pitch them at 7s. It's either 5 or 10, isn't it? There's never really much comes up.
No, there isn't much
between.
in that. There isn't a great deal in that middle ground. Maybe that's why they pitched it at nearly 7%, and goodness me, that's excellent. Very boring for me to sit here and say how good it is. That's really good. It's really good, and not be critical. But actually, I'm not sure how you could improve that.
I'm very much inclined to agree. It's one of those where it delivers what it says it will deliver, and more.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Sort of after Christmas dinner.
Go well with a Christmas pudding.
Christmas pudding. Let your dinner go down. Have your Christmas pudding, and then maybe have a ground stump chaser after your Christmas pudding.
Let's hear from Mark and see what he can tell us about Twisted Tree.
Hello guys, first off thanks for having us on the podcast. My name's Mark, and together with my brother Peter we're the co-owners of Twisted Tree Brewery. We've actually only been brewing on site now for about 2 months, so it's safe to say we're still running around like headless chickens, so apologies for keeping this short. I'd love to join you on the podcast soon for a proper chat and a beer, and we've got a bit more breathing room in us. Like many brewers, we started our journey off experimenting at home. One night, after enjoying probably a bit too much of our home brew, we had a bright idea to take things sort of to the next level. We set up shop in a beautiful estate in some charming converted farm buildings with a 1,000-litre brewery that we're using at the minute. We're sort of still getting our bearings, but we're hoping to open our doors to the public for some open days in the new year once we're a bit more settled in. But for us, really, we see beer as more than just a drink. We see it as a catalyst for connection. It's part of human culture for thousands of years. We're passionate about carrying that spirit forward. With every brew we try to do, we try and sort of infuse it with a bit of camaraderie and heart and soul, and a bit of us into it that hopefully makes it sort of seem more than just the dribble you get from the big boys. I've sent you over a couple of beers, and they're from our first batch that I'd like you to try. It's a coffee-infused stout. It packs a bit of a punch at 6.9%, and it's got a real deep and rich, full-bodied taste to it with a satisfying coffee finish. You might just pick up some of the Chinook and First Gold hops that are subtly shining through those darker malts. It's definitely a brew straight from our hearts, and we'd love to know what you think about it, and you can discover the sort of our range that we've got so far that our little family brewery has to offer at twistedtreebrewery.com, and also if you follow us on the socials you'll be able to catch our latest brew launches and sneak peeks at some of the exciting creations we've got in the planning and brewing process for next year. But we've hopefully got some new, different and interesting stuff coming out of our brewery door. So yeah, no, thanks for having us on the podcast, and hopefully we'll catch up soon with a beer.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Generally, breweries tend to pick up the pace with each batch, make tweaks, as we've heard so many times before, and improve and improve and improve. But goodness, if that happens to this beer, it'll be through the roof.
It's hard to see where they would go from here with it, to be honest. Like, I think you just sort of say, right, we've nailed this one. Let's try something else and see what else we can do. But if this is any indication as to what they can do, then Twisted Tree will be a brewery to definitely keep an eye on once they expand a bit in 2025 and beyond. I mean, they do have other beers, just to give you a quick idea. So they've got an IPA called Trunk IPA. They've got Twist Twig, which is a low alcohol beer. Then you've got Dark Rootgasm, which is an Imperial Espresso Stout. That could be quite a big hitter.
What ABV is that? 10 or something, is it?
1 second. And that weighs in at, 10.
I'm just looking at this beer in the glass here, and I've been there for a few minutes now as we've listened to Mark talk and we've talked amongst ourselves, and it's just settled lovely in the glass. But the head, it's retained its head all the way down the glass. Looks lovely. I'm blown away, really, because there's not many beers that will be as good as that a brewery make from a standing start.
Daftaboutcraft.
One thing we like to do on Daftaboutcraft is talk to breweries you might not have heard of, might not know much about. And when I was at the Brewers Congress in London a few months ago, I bumped into Alex from B-Man Brewery. Saw his name badge and I thought, yeah, I've heard of B-Man. Let's get him on the podcast. He kindly agreed to come on, and here he is. How you doing, Alex?
Hey, Dave. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Now, I always wondered where B-Man came from. Then when I found out your surname was Berryman, is where it comes from, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a nickname I had for many years, and when I wanted to start the brewery, it just kind of seemed obvious.
Yeah, we had a little chat about this, and we thought, well, yeah, it must be a name from school or something like that, or college or something. Excellent. So your brewing journey, when did that start? How long have you been doing this for?
So I started the brewery in 2021, April time, and that was off the back of being a home brewer for a number of years, but really getting serious about it, being furloughed from my job as a food scientist. And you just have all this time and get to refocus on what is important to you a little bit, I guess. And for me, that was brewing. Learned about it with it helped with the context of my previous job as a food scientist. I'd almost been hungering for a bit of that when I wasn't getting that in a day job, and then learning more about it through when I was furloughed, it was so exciting. And then when I went back to back from being furloughed into the food science role, I really missed spending all my time thinking, brewing, living brewing, even though it was a homebrew scale at that point. And I thought, this is actually what I want to be doing. And then I had a good year of just figuring out how I can make that a reality and putting that into action. And that's what happened when I started in 2021. It was kind of getting back to where I wanted to be from what I'd enjoyed through furlough.
Obviously, we've spoken to lots of breweries who actually started out in COVID. You were sort of a year later. But what did happen during COVID, I remember watching them, and I know Dave watched a lot as well, was a lot of breweries who were in existence started putting out a lot of live streams and a lot of videos about what was going on, and almost not quite tutorials, but it felt like there was a lot of information all of a sudden around. Did you sort of really tap into that as well when you were on furlough?
I did. The one that hooked me in was a course by Charlie Bamforth, who's like a well-known brewing scientist. He did a great Courses Plus video, and that was a scientific angle essentially. And then once that kind of got me excited about that side of it, you see all the craft stuff coming through from, like you've said, breweries doing that, and really interesting stuff. And I think a lot of people had that on the mind, because if you sat at home all the time, what better than a nice beer to to have in the evenings or whatever.
Well, we've all got a beer in front of us. Well, I've got two, of course, but I always like to have one more. But the one we're all going to open first of all is the New England IPA. I opened it actually while you were just talking there, and straight away I could, when you open a can sometimes and you can smell it, I could smell it, which is always a great sign. Then I poured it out, and we've got this lovely yellow colour, lovely hazy yellow colour. Smells really good, looks really good.
I thought I was going to ask you about the hops you've used here, Alex, because it was quite interesting. I can sort of make my amateur guess that you went for two really super fruity ones and then the Centennial to add the bitterness and sort of round it off a bit. Would that be not too far wrong, or is that?
That's spot on. Yeah, Centennial is my kind of go-to bittering hop. You'll find it in a lot of my beers.
And what would you sort of say as we sort of get stuck into this? What are your sort of? Are you tied to any one style? Do you like to do every style, or what sort of is a B-man beer essentially?
I think I've discovered more and more what that is, having been open 3 years now. And I think what I gravitate towards tend to be pale beers, and they're not strictly hazy New Englands either. So I am a big fan of West Coasts, of wheat beers, saisons, anything where I can find a little bit extra flavour in there to keep me interested and excited about pale beers, essentially. And I think my brewing style is probably on the more bitter end as well, in terms of a bit more robust, and hooking you in for the next sip is what I like in a beer anyway.
What do you think, Dave? That does that for me. I think a bit of saying hooking you in for the next bit, because it's fruity enough, but it's not a sickly, not sickly, it's not a super sweet beer, is it?
The fruit sort of leaps out of the can at you, and when you smell it, it's there. And when you taste it, it is there, but a little less than it smells, and with a bit of bitterness at the end. And a little bit of almost like a mustiness to the aroma as well. There's
something that goes through the sort of middle of when you're tasting it, I think. Is that what you get as well?
I think that could be it, yeah.
So not quite going towards a Saison or something like that, but or full Belgian-y, but it's quite different for a New England.
Very nice. Actually, it's very, very drinkable.
Yeah, it's only 4.5% as well, which would be on the low end for New England.
I've just looked, actually. I hadn't noticed it was Nectaron and Superdelic. Now, I love Nectaron. Also quite like Superdelic as well. I've had quite a few beers with those two hops in. Yeah, they're quite a matchup, aren't they, actually, because they're both ultra fruity, yeah.
Yeah, that was my thinking. And I was very happy to get my hands on Superdelic, because the first time I brewed this beer was Nelson instead. So happy to get it to where I wanted to start with.
So how far do your beers get? Because this is the first time, I don't know about you, Dave, this is the first time I've had one of your beers.
Likewise.
For the first 2 years, it was hyper local. So Oxford pretty much exclusively. And then just this year, I got bigger equipment and I've been able to actually have enough beer to take more places. So it can kind of get out to Reading, Cambridge, bit of London, kind of wherever I can drive to, because I don't think I've mentioned this so far, but there's still no other employees at B-Man Brewery. So everywhere it's sold, I've been in and said hello, essentially.
Now, is this because you're a massive control freak and you don't want to let anybody else get involved? Or is it because it can only support one person at the moment and the ambition is to grow so you can support more people?
I think it probably started with the control freak element to some degree, are very specific over the process, and that's important to me. So yeah, that will be difficult to hand off when the time comes, but I don't see that for a long time. I would like to grow the business just to make it a bit more seamless for myself, because there's only so long you can be doing absolutely everything, and it's pretty exhausting, to be honest, particularly as the scale of how much beer I make is going up. You know, I'm not increasing in strength by that much, so lifting that extra load of kegs or extra days canning longer runs, it does add up.
It's hard work, isn't it? You know, the manual stuff as well, lugging stuff around, like you say. People often don't think of that. When there's one person on their own, you're doing the whole shebang, from posting on social media to loading the car or the vanner.
Yeah, for local customers, I'm still delivering direct out of a Fiat 500. So,
oh my goodness,
this is the sort of content I love. That is awesome.
Yeah, you can get 6 kegs, 6 30-litre kegs in a Fiat 500, 7 if you're really trying. But
impressive.
Yeah, I do get help from Danny, my wife, and she does all of the artwork as well, which is.
I was going to ask you about the art. I was going to ask about the artwork, because each can is very different, but they fit together beautifully. They're all black and white. Well, you're best describing them. You tell us about them.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. They're all unique ideas. So they're what Danny's imagination has come up with for each can. It's her art style through and through. She was making art like this before I started the brewery. So it was just a really kind of like how the name felt really obvious. It felt really like genuine just to put her artwork on it too, because it's fantastic. And it puts a bit of our personality in the can and outside the can.
Even though they're black and white, they would stand out in a bottle shop. They definitely have that look, which I think is not even half of that these days on the shelves. I think it's sort of more like 80% of what you have to do now is you have to make the product stand out to get it in people's mouths.
There's so much noise on bottle shop shelves and in fridges these days, and so much colour. Actually, the ones that often stand out, Black Iris often stand out because they're black and white. Ampersand, again, the white can. And, you know, as long as everybody doesn't start doing the black and white thing, they're going to stand out really well.
Thank you. I mean, I've had to hold strong the amount of people that have said, ooh, a splash of colour would be just the thing.
I can see the argument if, say, for example, so I don't think we've said, which is remiss of us, Newsy Doozer is what we're drinking now. Like, for example, I don't know, if there was a bit of blue for the lake, I can see why people are saying just a splash, but equally, I like it as black and white. Maybe it's a splash when it's a special or something, you know?
It's Danny's artwork as well. So
no, you can't mess with the artist.
Well, it would be it'd be folly, wouldn't it? But
don't fall out with the artist, especially when you're at the half.
No, and I wouldn't change it. I think the only thing you've said with Splash was this, like, we've done a collab beer before where you're bringing their art into it, and then it's appropriate.
Yeah.
So who have you collabed with then?
The one I was just referencing was Blunt Rock Brewery. So we did that last year, where I went to them and we did a lovely beer called Sipping Container, because their brewery, particularly their tap room now, was based out of shipping containers, and mine is also based out of very nicely renovated shipping containers. So we had that in common, and we used the same brew kit when we first started each as well. I mean, they've got an enormous kit now, well, mine's a lot bigger too. But we had that in common, and then I returned the favour and had them over to the brewery, and we brewed a nice fight IPA as well.
Oh, nice.
We don't see so many of those these days. It's nice to see things like that coming back around, because everyone did those for a period, and it sort of felt like they didn't really...
They were there, weren't they? But they didn't
They were
take
there,
off.
but they perhaps now with people actually doing it and not so many populating the market, it will stand out and it'll be a nice change of pace.
That's the hope. Do it with some intention, hopefully make a nice beer.
So obviously you said your Fiat 500's going around Oxford. Because we had this when we had Vibish on a few months ago with Swindon, which was a complete sort of, turns out, craft beer hotspot almost, which we really weren't aware of. What's the scene like in Oxford? Is there much sort of beer-wise, or...?
Before Alex answers this, my wife goes to Oxford for work sometimes, and she always wants to go somewhere for a nice drink or, a nice tap room or something, and she really, really struggles. Now, is she just not finding the right places, or is it a bit of a dead spot in the craft world?
It's definitely not as populous as a lot of cities of that size in terms of craft beer. And, even when I was thinking of starting up, I was looking around, and I kind of wanted more craft beer in the area as well. There has been some good stuff. We had an amazing bottle shop for about 3 years, and sadly that closed. That was called Big Scary Monsters Social Club, and that gave everyone a good taste. Now, your sort of best places to go for craft beer in Oxford are the Lamb and Flag pub and the Library pub. Lamb and Flag is got about 10 taps, and there are 10 keg lines, a really good selection, and they get really good quality beer in. And then the Star is like a fantastic locals place. And then other than that, you've got the other large craft brewery, Tap Social there, and they have a tap room in the west of Oxford, but that's kind of mainly it in Oxford.
Why is it so quiet when you've got Reading, which isn't far away, which is absolutely full of craft?
It's an interesting one. I've asked myself this a lot because I'm working within that, and I think there is a factor where the rent for a small business to start up is astronomical, and a lot of it just isn't there because it's either owned by the university and they're just sitting on it because that's what they do with their investment sometimes, or stuff gets snapped up for the tourist industry, which is very popular in Oxford. So to have something quite authentic and for an independent, it's a struggle in Oxford.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, now you've said it. It really does.
It does, because I would sort of obviously be a bit closer to Cambridge as well, and it would probably be similar. Like, there would be a few more breweries, but they wouldn't necessarily be in Cambridge. They'll be in the surrounding area where it's probably, as you say, stuff isn't either owned by the university or getting snapped up for very high business rates. Are you sort of based in Oxford, or are you sort of on the outskirts in industrial estate, or where are you sort of working from?
Yeah, the brewery is about 20 minutes drive south of Oxford, which is further out than I'd like it, to be honest. I mean, I live in Oxford, so I'm going out to the brewery, and it's really just a case of getting set up where I could. So it's in this industrial estate with all lots of shipping containers and other small businesses, and it's a good production site, and it's allowed me to grow in the ways I've wanted to. Completely unsuitable for having visitors.
That was the next question. Yeah.
I know it does pain me. I'd love to have people out to the brewery, and I'm lucky when I get to show customers or other breweries around, like I did last week with Blunt Rock, and people from the Lamb and Flag pub were there as well. We had a lovely day. It's just, it's like Fort Knox in that site. There's 2 layers of big barriers that close up, and can't even...
Not conducive to having rowdy punters strolling around on a Friday night.
As much as I'd like it. So I think it's probably a case of biding my time until a suitable site becomes available and I could do the full taproom experience, which is what I'd like to do in due course.
But what you do have massively in your favour, like we've just said, is the fact that there's not many other people in the area doing it. So if you can get it established, the opportunities could be golden.
Yeah, I think I've seen that on the sort of wholesale end of things, that everywhere in Oxford I'd like my beer to be is there, really, and that's had a great reception. And even though B-Man isn't known in other cities or in other parts of the UK, particularly in Oxford, it does have a following, which is really, really nice.
You also don't need to be known everywhere else, do you? You can make money out of the local economy.
That's true. I think for the kind of beer I'm doing, it's good to bring more people into it than just local. But yeah, I think a strong foundation for sure.
We've found more and more doing this, that there's plenty of brewers out there who their beer never goes that far. It may go 30, 40, 50 miles and they're doing okay, It doesn't need to go to the other end of the country. Yeah, so if you've got solid foundations and a lot of support locally, I mean, have you got a lot of support? Do you find people coming back to buy your beer again and again? Do you get good feedback off the same people?
Yeah, definitely. Mainly in the strong relationships with pubs and other customers I've had, and then the fact that like consumers are going back to their time and time again and ordering it. And that's kind of key for the way I'm running B-Man and the kind of ethos of how I'm putting the beers out, because I don't come out with a new beer every month or very regularly at all, to be honest. I think since starting 3 years ago, I've released 6 beers.
Wow.
That is interesting.
It's a statement in itself, really.
That is a statement, actually, because you get, when we had Vibish on and they'd be going a similar amount of time, they'd got dozens and dozens of beers they'd released.
That was sort of a new beer every 3 or 4 weeks, wasn't it? So what's the sort of thinking with that? I mean, obviously, what you're doing, people want. So I'm not sort of knocking it and saying it's not working, but it's just really interesting because it feels like every brewery has to produce a new beer every week. If they're not, they're standing still almost.
Or are you happy not to be competing with all those other people? You just go at your own pace and do your own thing.
I think there's a process that keeping up with in a way that might not be helpful to you. It is just my estimation of it, and that didn't really fit with how I like to do things anyway.
If you start that, this is let's tell the listeners what's happening. So Dave is sat in front of his fridge right now, and as we were talking then, he's just got up and gone to the fridge to get his second beer, which means he's finished the first one and he really enjoyed it. Very much the same as me. I'm ready for my second one too.
Yes, it wasn't awkward at all watching a man try and get into his fridge while not strangling himself with his headphones.
Not at all. If you start releasing 1 or 2 new beers every week, you get caught in that cycle. You've then got to live up to it.
The enjoyment I've had and that's brought the best out of me in brewing is to be refining recipes time on time again.
You've taken the words out of my mouth there, because we've always found with previous guests that some of the best are tinkers and the scientists. And obviously you've got the food science background where it's never right. It's never 100% how you want it. And there's always that extra percent you want to do it and do it again and do it again. It sounds like perhaps, is that fair, that you sort of look at them and go, yeah, this was good, but I could maybe make it a little bit better, so I'm going to do it again and keep doing that process?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, if you can get to the point where you've imagined a beer and then you can work your way towards it, I like doing it that way.
Now, having said that Dave was scampering around in the background getting into his fridge for his second beer, I've just opened mine as well. That first one, actually, the New England, I really enjoyed that. That went down really, really well, didn't it, Dave?
Yeah, no, I'm possibly more excited about this one because
this is your thing, isn't it, the wheat beers?
It is. I love a wheat beer. I sort of history of getting into craft beer and everything was probably growing up in my early 20s when there wasn't necessarily craft, but there was all these great German and Belgian beers, which I'd never heard of, and finding them and finding these styles and everything, that sort of hooked me in. And a wheat beer's always been a beer that's stuck with me, and I love German wheat beers. I sort of have them as the sort of pinnacle, and I'm always really intrigued when craft breweries do wheat beers because I think there's room to do both, but I'm always really interested to see what the spin is from a craft brewery on what is a very traditional sort of centuries old style which works. So what was sort of your thinking of doing a wheat and everything?
It was to get people excited for a pale beer that wasn't a typical hazy pale ale and bring some flavours in that...
Dave is going to do his nut when he tastes this. This is really, really good.
Imitation is not the right word. That is a very good wheat beer, which if I didn't know where it had come from and I was just giving it blind, I would quite happily think it had come from somewhere in Germany, which I hope you will take as praise.
I'll take that, yeah. I think the idea was to bring that, add something that, for me, made it an exciting style for people, and people who may not necessarily go in for wheat beers would enjoy it as well.
Goodness, that's really good, isn't it? It's quite pokey as well at 6%. All those flavours you associate with the wheat beer, they're all there, aren't they?
They are, but they're also not, in a different way, which is really cool. The traditional is the banana and the cloves, and I see on the ingredients you've got orange peel.
Orange here as well, yeah.
And I do get that orange peel marmalade bit right at the end. And I see you've got Centennial in there again. How you've made that taste like that with Centennial and Citra is some very impressive science. That really intrigues me.
So how have you done that?
Not overnight. It's taken many iterations to work it up to that.
How many iterations did it take to get to this point, and over what period of time?
2 years, and I think 14 iterations.
Wow.
And are you done now, or will there be 15, 16, 17 at some point?
Maybe I'm done for now, but I'm constantly keeping an eye on it and if I've got ideas of where I want to take it, then I'll implement them.
I don't know if you can take that anywhere else, really. That's superb.
If this does get to iteration 20 or something, I want to taste that one because this is really good.
I can't find fault with that. And as Dave will testify, I'm a very picky character with beers, but I love that. That's so. I was very impressed with New England, but that's so up my street with the type of beer that I like to drink.
So if this beer had been in your advent calendar and you hadn't have seen who it was by, but say we sort of fooled you and said, "Oh, this is a German wheat beer," you'd have believed it.
I wouldn't have blinked.
Well, they are. You're doing something right then. Dave knows a lot more about wheat beers than me, but I'll have them if they're there. But that's very good, very drinkable as well.
I would have can after can of this until I probably fell over because, as Dave said, at 6% it will catch up with you. But that's a great beer. That's one of the nicest beers I've had in a good few months.
See what he rates it on Untapped afterwards because he's a real stingy. So what style of beer haven't you brewed that you still want to brew? What's on the agenda for you in the next few months?
The next one is actually a lager. I've never brewed a lager, so it would be an interesting way to do things. And the reason I'm only getting to it now is because I wasn't prepared to do a lager without affording it the full time care and attention that I wanted to, and I've still only got 2 tanks, so tying them up for a lager is
you're
hard.
tying one up for quite a long time, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll be tying both of them up with Czech Pilsner and a dark lager. Czech dark lager. So,
I was going to say, what twist are you doing on the?
Yeah,
it's not going to be a normal, 3.5%, 4% lager. What twist are you doing?
I've not written the recipe yet, so I'll have to see. It's one of those where just making a really good one is going to be satisfaction enough in some ways, but I'll still be looking for angles where I can add something appropriately.
A Czech dark lager is sort of different enough to go into a market and stand out a bit, I think. I mean, I can't think of too many of those that jump out off the top of my head.
And I do love the fact that it is December and you're talking about making a lager. Most people will be talking about that in June or August, not in December.
Yeah.
I love that. You can do what you want, can't you?
Well, yeah, and maybe the brewers can see where I'm coming from in that if you're going to tie your tanks up, doing it over January isn't a bad time to do it.
Actually, it's quite a good idea when you think about it with dry January and what have you coming up. Yeah.
And the groundwater's nice and cold for reaching lager fermentation temperature when you're cooling the work down at the end of the process.
You see, there's method to the madness here. There really is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And will this be one that you're sort of thinking, well, if I'm doing it now and I like it, then I can refine it to get it again for summertime? Or is it sort of, it has to be done now because, as you say, you've got 2 tanks, you don't want to tie them up for too long before you then got to get back to producing the beers that are already in circulation and need to go out again?
I'll have to see. It's the kind of thing I might seize my opportunity at the moment and keep in the back pocket until operationally it's simpler for me to have it going. I do some seasonal beers in terms of like one of the 6 just comes out over winter time, and I've not even done it this year. It's a double dark mild, 6% dark mild.
Are you just brewing beers that he likes, or
it's like you sort of hot wired into my brain of all the beers I sort of love to drink.
But yeah, I mean, even that one, I've done 4 iterations of it, so it's still edges closer to where I want it all the time. So
obviously we've got Christmas coming up and the New Year. People make New Year's resolutions and stuff. Where do you want to take your business in the next 12 months? If we reconvened in 12 months' time, what would have changed for you?
That's a hard one. This time last year, I just wanted to get enough beer out to people. I think at the moment, I've got enough beer to keep me busy, which is really good. So I think next year is almost just solidifying things a lot because I'm still only 1 year into this new equipment, which I'm on top of, but it's now I can have fun with it a bit more.
So the new equipment, what sort of size kit are we talking about now? You've said you've got 2 fermenters, but what size is the actual brew kit?
So the brew kit is 500 litres, and then the fermenters are 1,000 litres each.
Okay.
So I'm double batching into the fermenters.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable amount. The brewery, as I've said, it's in a converted shipping container, a 40-foot shipping container. So it's a real squeeze in there. So I can't fit any more tanks in. Even the tanks I do have, I think there's 4 or 5 millimeters.
I bet that was fun putting those in there, wasn't it?
It's fun's one way of putting it, yeah. You get good at sliding around hundreds of kilos of steel, sliding it around the brewery.
Would there be a desire in time to move out of the container if possible? Like, I can imagine right now it probably has its own challenges, but isn't too bad. But in the summer, is brewing in a container much fun, or is it a bit of a sweatbox and some?
There's not enough room to swing a cat either. So whenever I'm doing anything like kegging, I'm having to move certain things to get to clear. And then in the summer, I'm having the big doors at the back open. It's got windows along the side of it, and then a nice door. So that's all wide open in the summer. I think in the future, it's got to move. It's just about doing what you can when you can. I'm not someone with infinite resources. I'm very much just getting closer to where I want it to be. And I think the little dream I had when I was still at my old job, I'm still getting there. I've not quite gotten all the way to where I imagined in that little daydream. So things just take a really long time when you're doing this sort of thing.
But you're happy with where you are in that journey towards that dream. You're on the way and you're getting there.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you didn't enjoy where you're at, you'd be pretty miserable all the time, because that would be most of the experience I've had up to now is I think even when you get to that bit you think you want, you just set another goal. So you've got to enjoy it along the way as well.
How many days a week are you inside the brewery? Are you there every day or 3 or 4 days a week? How does it work?
Because I'm doing every part of the business, I couldn't be in the brewery every single day because
you need to go and deliver stuff and all the other things.
Go and deliver, go and visit people further afield, which I really enjoy doing. So yeah, going up to Cambridge or Cheltenham or places like that, I can go and do a little trip and see some people. Then, the old thing of running a brewery is paperwork and cleaning. So, yeah, there's still a lot of paperwork to do.
Yeah.
And then, if I was to put it in numbers, maybe averaging 2 or 3 days a week in the brewery, sometimes that'll be the entire week, and there'll be long days. There'll be like 12-hour days in the brewery every day. And then if both the tanks are full, I might not go to the brewery other than to just check up on things and clean things up a bit. It's highly variable. It's hard to get your head around sometimes, although I have been doing this a while now.
And then when you're canning, I guess it's 1 or 2 cans, well, can by can actually, probably single can at a time.
It was, because I was canning from starting the brewery. Very first iteration of the brewery, I had one 150-litre tank. Very small by comparison.
Still hard work though, isn't it?
Oh, it's the same amount of work. It's harder in some ways when you're dealing with equipment that, I was can by can. 1 seamer and 2 filler, very manual. I would move them over. I'd probably spill one over myself every 3rd can. Whereas just this year, I got automated canning line.
Wow.
Which is really nice.
Can't be that many breweries of your size that will have that sort of equipment.
Yeah, it's probably not the top of the line in terms of it's from China and it's very effective.
But it saves you a lot of time, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. And it works very well. I've only put 3 batches through it so far, and I'm happy with how it is now. And it saves me so much time. Just got my first pallet of cans in, and then you load them up. And it's still kind of designed for 2 people to use. So I'm sort of running from one end of it to the other a little bit.
So say before, originally, if you'd got 200 cans to fill, how long would it have taken you before, and how long does it take you with the current equipment?
Yeah, I couldn't do 200 in a day with the old equipment. I could do, I think my best was 120 cans, and that was like 10-hour day.
Fancy a bit of that, Dave?
Well, just when you break that down, 12 cans an hour, you drink a can of beer. Everything has taken someone.
And that sounds worse than it feels when you're doing it, because a lot of that 10 hours will be the setup and the cleaning of things and the packing away afterwards. So once you get into the swing of it, it's okay. But then back when I was doing my very first canning runs, I was only doing 50 cans, but it would still take me like 3 or 4 hours.
Yep.
So it was not good. Whereas now I can blitz through 250 in an hour or 2.
Oh my goodness! What?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's much better. It's made scaling up possible whilst also keeping my sanity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, it's one of those things that people don't think about, how long it takes to put the beer into the can they're drinking it from. Nobody thinks of these things, do they? But it's a labor. It's a real labour.
Certainly not when it's probably at the level we're talking to with people. Like, you think of, Northern Monk and whatnot, or to use Butt an example, but there's other big breweries like it's just done. But obviously we're down. We like to talk to people who are doing it a lot, just to try and give that shine a light on
just how labour intensive these things are, and that's why the beer doesn't cost $3.99 a can.
And if you've done it right, then no drinker should be able to tell that you've done it one or two at a time in comparison.
And I tell you what, I think that's a really good point, because those two beers we've had, and I've nearly finished my second one as well, those two beers, they could have come from any brewery, any top brewery in this country.
100%. I'm trying so hard to go slowly with mine because I want to just keep going with it because I'm enjoying it so much, but it's nearly done, unfortunately.
I guess that you don't actually see that many people drinking your product live, as it were, unless you're in pubs where they're drinking it.
It's a funny one. Definitely when I first started it, there was a disconnect. I think the way I get around that is by being at my customers a lot, in terms of the Lamb and Flag, which is really good craft beer pub in Oxford. I'm visiting there a lot. Not too much, but just plenty.
And but are you able to go in there and watch people drink your product without people knowing who you are? Or do they all know now?
I mean, they'll only know me if someone at the bar who, I know all the bar staff more or less. If they go, oh, there's B-Man, he did it. And then I have to sit there awkwardly as like, I get waved at by a few people, which, some of them come up and say hi, and that's great. But yeah, it's harder to get that direct feedback than if, say, it was a tap room, because then you're having so many people coming and giving you feedback, which I can only get tastes of when I do like festivals or markets or things like that. But that being said, because it's only 6 beers, I know the beers quite well. So it's nice to see people are enjoying them. And then, if people have things to say about it, that's really nice as well. They're not completely unknown quantities to me either, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's not a case of someone coming up and going, oh, I really like this. And you think, well, probably goes back to what we said earlier, where if you're releasing a new beer every 2-3 weeks, where you're like, which one was this? When did I do that? Whereas if you know these beers inside out, you know them better than anyone else. So you can give people chapter and verse if they want to hear it.
Yeah, I tend not to articulate it too much to people. If they're enjoying it, then I'm happy.
Yeah, let them enjoy it and don't preach to them. Yeah, it's a good way to be, I think. So this is a fascinating conversation. I love this. And the beers are, honestly, I've enjoyed both of these beers so much. I wish I'd got a third and a fourth one to go at. But if people want to get hold of your beers who are maybe listening to this now, is there anywhere online they can go to get hold of them?
I think at this point, the best thing you can do is follow our Instagram, support us, help us get to a point where we can get these beers more places. That's going to be the best thing, because there isn't really a place I can point you to and say, go there for the beer, because I don't even run a web shop because the site is untenable to do so for various reasons. So if you can help the business grow through your support, then that'll help it get to more people's hands. And then just keep an eye out, because I'm trying to pop it up in more places around the country. So any help with that is great.
Look, if you see any of these beers anywhere, listeners, you've got to try them. We drink a lot of beers on this podcast, and we both have our own favourite styles of beers, and wheat beers wouldn't necessarily be my favourites, but that is awesome. It's so good. It is really, really good, and I know Dave's enjoyed it as well. So we've had 2 beers each here, got through them really, really quickly, and really enjoyed them, which is a testament to what you're doing, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I can't speak highly enough of Wheat Wizard as a beer. So if you get to see that and you like a wheat beer, I would say buy as many as you can, because they're not that easy to get hold of.
I want to reconvene in 12 months' time and see where you are. I think that'd be really interesting. Really, really interesting. Are you up for that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, sign me up.
Awesome. See you next Christmas then.
Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Now, look, have a lovely Christmas and New Year, and thank you so much for letting us try your beers, because we've really enjoyed them. Cheers.
Daftaboutcraft.
Cue the music. It's tried and tested time. What beers have we enjoyed since we last spoke to you? Dave, kick us off. What you've been enjoying?
Well, mine's a bit of a weird one. I wouldn't say, as a whole, since we last did an episode, I've had a beer until this episode, ironically, but I've been like, wow, and then I did. But we talk about them at length, so I can't use them. So aside from that, it's not so much a beer, but it's just an example of what we've talked about, where you forget about breweries or you have something and then you never go back. But the beer I'm talking about is Nectar IPA V3 or version 3, and it's from Upfront Brewing up in Glasgow. Now, I've had one other Upfront beer, and that was the beer Das ist Techno 6.
Love that beer.
Yep, exactly. You love that beer because it is a goes. I don't like that beer because it's a goes, but I tried it I tried that beer in 2021. I've not had anything from Up Front since, and that was the only beer I'd ever had from them. Now, it's not because I don't like Up Front. I just don't necessarily see it very often and wouldn't have thought to go find them. So when I went to local bottle shop in Ipswich, I saw a can of Up Front, and I thought, I don't know if I've had any Up Front, forgetting I'd had this beer 3 years ago. And I was really impressed. Now makes me want to try more Up Front. So Nectar IPA, it's got specialist yeast in it. This was double dry hopped with Harlequin, Citra and Mosaic. Now, that combo wouldn't necessarily be the fruitiest. This beer was really thick, full and fruity. I really enjoyed it. Really good body to it. It wasn't like mind-blowingly good beer, but it wasn't an above average beer for sure. But as I say, the main thing it did for me was think, oh, you know what? If I'm thinking about placing an order somewhere, or if I see something, I'm going to have some more up front.
Yeah.
So that's my tried and tested.
Yeah, and we should say that the reason you didn't particularly like the Goes is because you don't particularly like Goes, not because it was an upfront beer.
No, not at all. Nothing wrong with the beer itself. If you like that style, I just don't. I don't get on with that style. So yeah, no knock on them. And then when you see what they do with an IPA, I'm like, happy days.
So there's a reminder: if you've had a beer from a brew you didn't like, go back to them, try something else, because you might find you absolutely love it, and they might also have improved their beers in the meantime as well. And my tried and tested comes from the Steam Machine Brewing Company from Newton Aycliffe, Darlington. Now, I've never had that many of their beers, to be honest. I'm aware of their existence, don't see their beers that much.
I think I'm right in saying, is Steam Machine the one that they do a bit of a subscription type service?
I think they might do, actually, yes. I think you're right, yes. And the guy behind the brewery there who does all the brewing, he very much does exactly what he wants to do, so I'm led to believe. And when I tell you what beer this is, that will become apparent. This was a beer called Triple Margot, a 7.4% French white wine barrel-aged triple. So a triple aged in white wine barrels, 7.4%.
It's slightly low ABV for a triple, I would say.
When we drank this at about 1 o'clock in the morning, that didn't strike me, but now you say it. But oh my goodness, this was another 5 out of 5 moment for me on Untapped, actually, because it just had everything that it should have. It was fruity, it was winey, but it didn't taste too heavy on the alcohol, not too boozy. It was just so delicate, and I wanted to go back to it and back to it. It was only a 375ml bottle between the two of us, so we soon got through it. But we opened another one then, which was not quite as good, but still very good.
When you say opened, you didn't open the same bottle again, you opened a different Steam Machine.
A different one, yeah,
right,
different
gotcha.
one. It was just a different beer. It was also very good, but that was absolutely standout. So yeah, see some Steam Machine, get hold of it.
Get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Daftaboutcraft1.
And now it's time for Hype or Tripe.
10 years Track have been going, and to celebrate their 10th birthday, they've released some new beers, and we've got them. But are they hype or are they tripe? That's the question.
As you said earlier on the episode, Dave, I don't know when we last had any track on the podcast.
No, they're really, really well known now, especially for those gold top beers they do, and for all sorts of styles, and they're known for having a wonderful tap room up in Manchester, and they're really at the forefront now of the craft scene, I would say, particularly in Manchester and the Northwest.
Yeah, they're a top tier brewery. You sort of think of the big hitters, they're a big hitter. The first beer I always think of them is Sonoma.
Sonoma, yeah. Which I had on cask recently, actually, at a beer festival hosted by Hush Brewing. Which was at the Plaza in Northwich. It was their very first festival. I've got to talk about this, actually. It was their first festival. It was really well attended over 2 sessions. I got an invite, went along, and they'd got 8-10 different breweries there, and also a cask bar, and they'd got Sonoma on cask, and people rave about it, don't they? So it's this sort of thing you've got to try. And it was, in fairness, it was very, very good. But yeah, you're right. Track now are right up there. And for me, actually, in my mind, they've surpassed Cloudwater at this point.
I don't think that's unfair. I have such a problem with Cloudwater because we get very in the weeds. But when Cloudwater were first, like going back probably 10 years, if not more, when they were first doing their beers, the artwork was iconic. The beers were really different. The beers were really great. And to be fair, we've had really good beers from Cloudwater on this podcast. I'm thinking of Persistence of Utah, which was on Hype or Tripe, was amazing. However, I never pick up a Cloudwater beer when if I'm buying any beer. I just don't. I don't know why. It's probably just a mental block on my part, but I just don't.
What is really interesting in all of this is that during COVID, Track lost their premises and moved in with Cloudwater. And by the time COVID came to an end, they kind of elevated their profile, maybe off the back of Cloudwater, I don't know. But having spent time there, they opened the tap room opposite Cloudwater's and they just seem to have gone up and up and up. But does this beer live up to the reputation?
We have digressed, but what we have here is two 10th birthday dippers. We're trying one each. We have both of them, but for the purposes of this, we're trying one each. They're both collabs. One, the beer I'm having is called Pyron, which is a collab with Finback in America. And the beer you've got is called Nova and is a collab with Beak down in Lewis.
What is also ironic, of course, is that Cloudwater have had a lot of beers with American breweries like Finback over the past few years. I don't know whether there's anything to read into that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, potentially. But what they've done for this is they've called the beer as part of their 10 orbits. That's what it is, sort of as in 10 orbits around the world, I guess, is 10 birthdays. And there's very much a solar theme to the artwork and names and whatnot. So Pyron is weighing in at 8.2%, and it is a dipper with, my heart sinks straight away for me, coconut, but then it's citrocryo and peacherine. So, I mean, my goodness, this should be...
Peacherine, right, okay.
I had a peacherine beer recently, and it was from the Colonel, and I wasn't that excited about it. It smelled really fruity, and it did not taste fruity. So perhaps that's going to be the backbone to this. Pours, probably what you'd expect. Nice bright yellow, hazy, ticks the boxes, doesn't do anything different. Ooh, okay. Nose-wise, it does. That's a weird nose.
When you said sort of coconut, I thought we were going to get some Sabro in here.
Do you know what I get? It's really weird. It reminds me of something to do with a curry. If you have a sweet curry, I'm thinking like the real mild stuff, like Kashmiri or something like that, where it's so sweet because they've got that flaked coconut in there.
Yeah.
This is what that smells of to me.
I'm glad I've got the beer that I've got then, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. That's quite a weird one to get.
So what's it taste like?
It tastes like the same thing. The coconut's really heavy for me, but I pick it out as a flavour usually. Oh, it's like getting quite a lot of desiccated coconut for me. The fruitiness is there, but unfortunately I'm now stuck with my analogy of it being a flipping mild curry, and it sort of tastes like a mild curry.
This is a great time. This is a great segue, actually. You know what you need for that, don't you?
I know what you're going to do because I was going to do it anyway, and they're right next to me, and I couldn't resist, and I've already had some, and they're fantastic. Have you had any?
I don't know whether I'm going to say the same thing. Yes. I wasn't going to say that. I have had some of those, though.
And how good are they?
Right, so what Dave's referring to is...
Howder Snacks, who very kindly sent us both a box of their snacks. Now, when they say snacks, we're talking crisps, Bombay mix, real savoury snacks. I'm looking at a bag of Poppadom Minis, which are tandoori barbecue flavour, for example. And
that would go really well, actually, yeah.
They are great. It's really tempting me to open the bag.
Do it, open it. I'd be fascinated to see what that beer is like with the addition of some food.
1 second.
See, this is great because you never... I mean, look at all that. You've got all the real-time rustling there. I'm going to leave all this in for you to hear. We hadn't planned to do this. This is purely off the cuff.
We had been meaning to give them their dues for sending us these out of the blue. Like, they just got in contact and said, would you like snacks? And of course, we're never going to say no.
I was absolutely delighted because I did see somebody from Love Island on Instagram eating some of these and bigging them up. So Daftaboutcraft is now officially in the same camp as Love Island, which is quite impressive.
Whether it's something we want to aspire to, I'm not sure, but we're there now anyway.
Right, so you've just had a little bite of your mini Poppadom. How does the beer then fit with that?
It kind of helps because that's tandoori barbecue. It's got a bit of heat to it, and it kind of helps. It pushes it a bit because on its own, for me, that's too sweet. It's too coconut sweet, but not coconut hop sweet. It's just coconut sweet. I stand by what I say with it tasting like a korma or something like that, where they've put that flaked coconut in. That's what I get. I get the fruity hop in the middle, but the coconut dominates. So to actually get something which takes the edge off, I'm eating these tandoori barbecue poppadoms, but you wouldn't want a salt vinegar or anything. You'd want something with a bit more savoury, but not vinegary edge. So
and
like
a bit of a kick,
a bit of a kick. Yeah. Thai Sweet Chili Sensations, other crisps are available. Would be a good one, I would have thought.
What I was going to say was it'd be really interesting if you paired it up with some cheese. That was a segue I was going for. Because
you know what?
Just before Christmas, we always do beer and cheese episodes, much to the annoyance of one particular listener in Aberdeen. He loves it really. He loves it really. But this time we're doing it with a difference. Dave will explain to you when he's finished his latest mini poppadom.
Yes, every year we do it, and we've sort of fumbled in the dark when we've done it. I don't think we've done it badly, but we're two amateurs doing it.
Yeah, and we've always held our hands up and said that as well.
What we really wanted to do this year is we wanted to get a pro on, and luckily we were able to source one. And Andy from
the Courtyard Dairy in Settle in Cumbria
very kindly joined us for easily probably one of the most informative and enjoyable hours we've had doing this podcast, I think. His knowledge of cheese, as you would hope, was immense. What he told us about the cheeses we tried was really, really fascinating, but he completely knows how to put it together with beer, and that showed as well, because what we did is we sort of said to him, these are the beers we've got, which one goes with this? He didn't know in advance what beers we had, he just knew styles roughly, didn't he?
So he sent us some cheeses, we got some beers, and he mixed and matched the cheeses to each beer style that we'd got, and it worked really, really well. And he taught us a lot of stuff we didn't know. He came at it from a really interesting perspective as well. So look out for that, and be a bonus episodes coming to you between now and Christmas. Give you some ideas of some sort of cheese and beer that you might want to try over the festive season. Right, Dave, it's driving me mad. What hops are in this beer of mine?
Let's play our favourite game.
I always lose at this game, but there must be something New Zealandish in there. There has to be. If you say no, then I'm being lied to.
So you think it is something New Zealand, yeah?
Yeah, it must be.
The hop involved is an unnamed hop at the moment.
From New Zealand.
NZH-101.
Excellent. You can just tell. But that doesn't really help us because we don't know what it's going to be or what it's... Is it just a single hop then?
It is a single hop, yeah.
It's very kind of Nelson Sauvin-ish and maybe a bit of Nectaron-ish as well.
Oh, I think I prefer that one.
Quite dank and sweaty on the hooter.
You know what? I don't hate the beer I've got, but the pairing it up with some crisps has really helped it. On its own, I'd find it really odd.
You know what the problem is with some of these beers, some of these sort of dippers? I mean, we don't have that many dippers these days, actually, do we? But you know what it is? They're a little bit boring, really.
They've only really got two moves, haven't they? One is the dank, sweaty socks route, and the other is the complete fruit bomb to the point it's almost sickly, which is kind of what I've got with this one.
I think if you were in a bar and you were having a third of it, that's great. You get through a third of that pretty quickly, but because we've got
440 cans,
so 2/3 or whatever it is, it seems like a bit of a chore almost to get through it.
I mean, I've just poured the rest out. It pours very thick, mine.
It does.
I think you say I'd have a third. Yours looks even thicker than mine, actually.
It is very thick.
I think if I was having this out, it would be a complete, depending where you have it at that, but it could be a complete night stopper. And you just be like, oh my God, I'm so sort of, now I've lost all my taste for hops. Like I'd almost be moving on to stronger stuff. Like I'd be thinking about rum now or something, because I'd just be like, I can't do any beer after this. This has just completely killed my palate for hops and flavours.
If you were to sort of go and have a Czech Pils or something now, you're barely going to taste it, are you?
It'd get washed away, wouldn't it?
Well, you should always sort of start low and work your way up, I suppose.
I don't know how I feel about this beer. I really like Track. I have no problem with Track. And I really like Finback as well whenever you sort of get hold of their stuff. I don't know if I like this very much.
You know what the problem is, don't you? We probably wouldn't have bought this beer if it wasn't for doing this feature on our podcast.
Correct.
That's the thing. It's not our type of beer these days.
No, it's not. Again, as we often do, the peek behind the curtain. We cast about and we look for something that stands out. You know, there was a double red IPA by Burnt Mill, which sort of felt like it would hit the brief, but by now when this episode comes out, it would have been out too long. These beers should still be knocking around in bottle shops, I would have thought.
How much were these on the website? Were they £10 a can or something?
No, they weren't actually. They were okay price-wise. They're about £7 a can, and then postage on top. Yeah, it doesn't fall into hype for me, my one. I'm interested to try the other one.
I wonder what my dogs would think, because there's a bit of an interesting tale about this, because You ordered these beers. We didn't get sent these beers free of charge or anything. Dave went on the website, bought them, and got them sent out to my address and to his address. And Dave texted me one day and said, my beers have arrived. I didn't really think much of it. And a couple of days later, I thought, well, where are my beers? They're not. I've not seen them.
I had a picture from a delivery company that delivered them, showing it was at your front door. Yeah, so I was pretty confident you got it.
So you'd seen a picture of the beers at the front door. I hadn't seen the beers. I had no knowledge of these whatsoever because you got the notification. And then I was in the hall one day and I noticed this can just sat on the table in the hall, and it was a track can. And I thought, what's that? And I sort of thought, where's that come from? Where's that come from? I thought, yes, it's one of these track birthday beers. But where's the other one? Turns out that the dogs had intercepted the pack. We've got 3 dogs. The dogs had intercepted the package, and the beers had become split up. Obviously ended up on the floor somewhere. One had ended up getting put on the table in the hall, the other on the fridge in the back room. So they were completely split up. I didn't even know they'd arrived. It's lucky, really, they didn't burst the cans. I've had laptops broken by dogs. I've had remote controls eaten by dogs. But as of yet, they've never burst a can. They love an empty can, not a full one, it seems. So we were lucky. But yeah, the moral of the story is collect your own parcel off the doorstep and don't let somebody else bring it in and leave it at the mercy of the dogs. Anyway, we digress again. Yes, I'm sure certain people would find this beer amazing and they'll be waxing lyrical about it. It's obviously very well made. I'm going to sit on the... Yes, you can sense it. I'm going to sit on the fence. It's very well made. It's not hype for me. Certainly isn't try. Great beer in the right hands. I'm not sure our hands are the right hands for this beer, however.
I think that's a very fair view. However, I don't like my beer very much, and I think for whatever reason, I don't know what the logic was behind adding coconut. I don't necessarily disagree with it because you can add coconut to a beer, but this is too much.
So there was actually physical coconut added to it. It wasn't just from hops.
This is it. It's not hops. And for me, that kills it as a beer because it's too much. The coconut, for my personal taste, far too heavy-handed. And as I say, I stick by it that if anyone has this and think it tastes like a curry, I completely get it. I don't want my beer to taste like a curry, nor do I want my curry to taste like a beer, you know?
And if anybody out there has tried either of these beers, do let us know and let us know what you think. It's always fascinating to get other people's views of the same beers.
I bet there'll be someone out there who'll love this and they say, it's like having, what's the coconut-based cocktail that people like? It's
pina colada.
Thank you. People will say it's a bit like a beery pina colada, really sweet, lovely bit of coconut, love it. And that's absolutely fine because it is all about opinions and it's subjective, but to me, it doesn't work. I don't like it.
Ever straight to the point. That's what we've got to do, though, isn't it? It's what we've got to do, I think. We pride ourselves on saying it how it is.
Yeah, and I'll always couch it because I'm always very aware that, what one man likes, one man or woman won't like. And that's fine. There'll easily be people out here who will like this, but I'm not one of them.
Dave, what have you got planned for Christmas?
Hang on, are you segueing or is this a general thing?
No, it was just a general thing because I'm just thinking we should probably mention Christmas a little bit more.
Having a young son, it sort of revolves around him. I think since our last episode, my work situation has changed. I'm putting as many irons in fires as I can. I'm probably going to end up burning myself. But
ironically, one of those irons is to come and work back with me again.
and the podcast will eat itself. But Christmas this year is probably a little bit more low key than I would have hoped it would have been. But we've taken Bob to plenty of garden centres already and things like that where they've got their Christmas things, and it is actually one of those that I didn't realise until you have kids, and we're proper digressing now. I've never been a huge Christmas fan because my birthday's actually in December anyway, so it's always felt like they're a bit too close together. But actually when you then have someone else who's experiencing it all again for the first time, it does rejuvenate you and it does make it quite fun again. So so it's just all going to be orientated around Bob. The advent calendar has come back again. We've gone back to the very first one she did. So she's gone to Beers of Europe, which is where she did her first one, just ordered a big box. This is 25 beers, German or Belgian in origin, or possibly there's some other European stuff, but it's all breweries I might not necessarily have had, or beers I've not had from breweries in Europe. So there's not really craft in that sense. It's gone traditional. So that's proving enjoyable.
What about your stout cupboard? Have you got any stouts you're going to crack open and get involved with?
You know what? I've still got beers in the top shelf, and it's now getting to that point. You know, we've did it in the past where we talk about these beers and go, God, this goes off in like 10 years. Yeah. I'm now getting stuff that's sat on the top shelf in a fridge, which I definitely some candidates. There's some Wander Beyond stuff which has been sat in there now at least 2 years, I think. I've also got a couple of big bottles still knocking around of things which I want to try. There's a Torside, one of their Dogs of War series, and I wonder if I might just bite the bullet at some point and go for that. So I do have some big stouts for sure. It's just finding the right
time to have them.
Because again, as much as I said 2 minutes ago how magical it is having a 17-month-old for Christmas, it's also a right pain in terms of I don't want to be drinking a 13% beer and then him waking up 2 hours later having just finished drinking that beer because I'll be not happy about it.
Yeah, that does make sense. I don't have any of these problems anymore. I've been there. Not that I ever really dealt with stuff in the middle of the night anyway, luckily. So anyway, I'm looking forward to drinking some Terra Tempo beers I had.
I'm very jealous of your Terra Tempo. Terra Tempo are actually were on my, and still would be to be fair, were on my brew to me list. For whatever reason, I don't think I ever actually have approached them to try and see if they would have parted with them. And I think what stopped me doing it actually is because the bottles are all 750s, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I thought that was probably a bit of a big ask for brew to me to try and go through a whole 750.
Guzzle 3/4 of a litre.
Guzzle a wine bottle, essentially.
In the first section of the podcast, yeah, that is true. No, I got 8 bottles. They're doing a Black Friday deal, £12 a bottle. They'd got 8 on the website, so I thought I'll get them all, and I did. And my goodness, there's some wonderfully coloured beers in there, all sorts of fruits you can imagine. There's a stout in there as well, so I'm really looking forward to those, and I'll report back next time. But
don't guzzle all of them through Christmas. Like save one.
Yes, we'll save one and have it. But the guys did say that if we want them to come on the podcast at any point, they will do. We'll try and take them up on that, actually.
I think so. I think that segues nicely into actually, we've talked about Christmas, but we were already well away with what is coming in 2025. But it probably is as good a point as any to say that if people or brewers are listening and want to get in touch and come on the podcast in next year and beyond, please do. We haven't discussed when we'll do it yet, but I suspect we will do it probably normally in the earlier part of the year. If there's breweries out there that you are enjoying already or someone you know is enjoying and you think they fit into the Brew to Me thing, that's what we want, because we'll probably do a Brew to Me special, but I suspect we'll probably do one maybe in the opening quarter of the year if we can.
Yeah, so March, April time. So if you know breweries you think we haven't tried, let us know and we'll try and collate 6-8 of them together and do a Brew to Me special. It's a good thing to have in the first quarter of the year, that is, breweries.
Yeah, so set you up for finding new beers for the rest of the year and new breweries.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dave, we've had some good beers on this episode. We started off...
Very good beers.
We started off with Brew to Me from...
Twisted Tree.
Which was sensational. We had some great beers with B-Man. We've talked about other great beers on Tried and Tested, and we've ended on a big beer in Hype or Tripe that we've probably decided isn't hype. For me, it isn't Tripe. For you, you haven't enjoyed it. But that's fine. It's all a game of opinions.
I'm very pleased that I've still got a bit of Twisted Tree left, which is now going to take the taste out of my mouth of it.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we said, having had a beer like that Dipper from Track, it'd be hard to find something you could go to. But you found something to go to. And what does that stout now taste like?
Well, now it's really, actually, for sitting and being open for a little bit, now it's a bit more espresso. Now the coffee's really starting to push through a bit more. Still rounded. That I'm very happy with.
Listeners, if you're going to get some beers in for Christmas, get some Twisted Tree. That's what I would say. I don't think you'll regret it.
If you see some B-Man in Oxfordshire, you also want that for your Christmas.
Maybe you can go into a bottle shop in Oxfordshire and find some B-Man and some Twisted Tree in the same bottle shop.
Although the bottle shop that wasn't good in Oxford is shut.
That is true. That is true. Can't have it all, can you? Anyway, look, we've had a great chat. Christmas is on the way. We've got our cheese special coming out between now and Christmas. A very Merry Christmas from me and Dave. Thank you very much for all your support during 2024. There'll be more of it in 2025. We'll get more and more listeners, speak to more and more breweries, and you'll carry on experiencing the craft beer journey with us. We'll see you very soon. Cheers, everyone.
Daft About Craft, the craft beer podcast.